That's wonderful. Listen, our lesson today is Your God Reigns, and it's from Isaiah chapter 52, verses 7 through 12. Now, I'm going to do an introduction. We're starting a new quarter today, and the new quarter is the righteous reign of God. And the first unit, which is the first month in our lesson series, the prophets proclaim God's power. And it's a study of some of the Old Testament prophets, Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Zephaniah. Now, our second unit, as opposed to the Old Testament, is going to be Jesus envisions the kingdom. And all the lessons are from the book of Matthew, Gospel of Matthew. And our final unit is God's eternal reign. And it's taken from Paul's letters, Galatians, Romans, and 1 Corinthians. Now, this quarter compares earthly rulers with those who regulate us with the rule of a different nature, and how, as Christians, we become a part of God's kingdom and his eternal reign. Now, the first question is really, who is Isaiah and what are his lessons? Some of the historical backdrop of this is very important because it takes into account the political history of the period. What was happening not only in Judah, where Isaiah was born, we believe, but also the kingdoms around it, not only the northern kingdom, the kingdom of Assyria above that, and then to the upper right would be Babylon, and then down below would be Egypt. And they were all fighting or contending for the land in Canaan.
And Vic, while you're at it, John Cave is in Istanbul, Turkey today.
Istanbul, Turkey.
Yeah.
I always knew he was Turkey.
No, not a Turkey. In Turkey. Tell him to go to, listen, we've got a shopping list from the Grand Bazaar. Don't forget to go by St. Sophia while you're there. The moonlight on the Bosphorus. Okay. Historical background. It's a period of turmoil and of uncertainty. And of course, I happen to think, when has it not been? Think about the events in our own lives and what all we've seen. I was talking to Archie ahead of time, about the old Salisbury going way back. So Isaiah's ministry spanned the period from the vision that he had in the temple about 740 BC till much later. Now, Isaiah lived during the reigns of 5 kings of Judah. That would become the Lord Kingdom. And the last 4 kings of Israel, the ones above. Now, Samaria fell to the Assyrians, to the Assyrian king at about 722. So it occurred during Isaiah's ministry. The Assyrians would, of course, eventually fall to Babylon, although they almost fell to Egypt. Egypt invaded, and it looked like the young Pharaoh was going to win, and then he lost in a crucial battle. He went too far, too fast, got separated from the main part of his army, and got caught. So Assyria would fall to Babylon, and Babylon would fall to Persia. And who would Persia fall to? Persia would later fall to Alexander the Great of Greece in about 350 BC. It was one of the few cases in history where the small fish devours a much larger one, because then the Persian Empire under Darius was sweeping, covered great areas of land. And then, of course, we know what happened after Greece. Of course, Rome comes along. And so it's just like one kingdom after another. I guess that's part of the lesson. Now, in Isaiah's personal life, we believe he was born in Judah, probably in Jerusalem. He was well educated and that's evident from his writings. And he had a grasp of political history, and he dared to express unpopular views. Should they pay tribute to Assyria, to get Assyria to leave them alone? Or should they make a deal with some other state? And he expressed unpopular views about the state, the economy, and he was well informed what was happening, not only in society around him, in the marketplace, but also in society itself, and the frustrations that the people were feeling over taxes, over one thing, over another. Now, Isaiah developed the major themes of his preaching. God is over all. And it's his concept of holiness, holiness to the nth degree. And God warned Isaiah that he would experience disappointments, but assured him that forgiveness would be given to the people who repented. Now, with Isaiah's perspective, he described 6 woes of the immoral nature of Judah at the time. Judah was rebellious. It was evil, iniquitous, alienated from God, corrupt, a sick people in a sick society. And there was no purpose in their excessive religious practices. What was the purpose of it? And it was a society based on pride, filled with charlatans, fraud, unappreciative people, ungrateful people, and then out of Proverbs, wise in their own eyes. What was true religion was really absent. And although Isaiah's indictments were severe, he did hold out hope. And that's another message of Isaiah, not only the gloom and doom, but the hope. Now, Isaiah's hope was based on his magnificent concept of God. God's holy, of course, to the nth degree. He was the Lord of all, King of the universe, a Lord of history. His character in his acts of righteousness. And Isaiah criticized the vanity and meaningless lessons of religious pride. And he demanded righteousness in religion. And it was based on humility and faith. God's plan, according to Isaiah, would be realized. And the redeemed of the Lord will proclaim it. Now, our text is from Isaiah 52:7. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of the messenger who announces who brings good news, who announces salvation, who says to Zion, your God reigns. Listen, your sentinels lift up their voices. Together they sing for joy. For in plain sight they see the return of the Lord to Zion. Break forth together into singing, you ruins of Jerusalem. For the Lord has comforted your people. God has redeemed Jerusalem. The Lord has bared his holy arm before the eyes of all nations, and all the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of our God. Depart, depart, depart. Go out from there. Touch no unclean thing. Go out from the midst of it. Purify yourselves, you who carry the vessels of the Lord. For you shall not go out in haste, and you shall not go in flight. For the Lord will go before you, and the Lord of Israel will be your rear guard. Our book, how do we go from what is the promise of hope and happy feet to the theme of disruption? And our lesson guide talks about, first of all, the state of society, of the theme of disruption. Now, they challenge us to think, what are the major disruptions in our lives? Well, the last one, of course, how about the COVID-19, the COVID epidemic, pandemic, it swept over the earth. People were dying. It affected I remember something that Paul Fisher said to our class one day. He said, he said, we will not be the same society after the COVID pandemic is over than we were before. And I guess truer words were never spoken. And things have changed during the pandemic. There's loss of jobs, businesses closed. They couldn't maintain opening. Nobody was going out. People were fearful. People were dying, emergency rooms were crowded. It was a terrible, terrible time. And every time we thought we were out of it, then there would be a variant to come along. And then what else? There's some supply chain problems. You'd go to the store to buy something and it wouldn't be there. And so that was just one disruption. Think of so many other disruptions in our lives. There was the 9/11. That changed things, didn't it? It sure changed travel. And even before that, the war in the Middle East. Then before that, we had the war in Vietnam, the 10-year war that seemed to go on and on and on. Catherine Porter, an economist, said that our nation wouldn't be out from under the expenditures of Vietnam in terms of money for just decades. But that wasn't the major thing. It was the loss of life. The people who gave their lives in that war. I remember what I felt, the emotion I felt when I visited the Vietnam Memorial in Washington. Whatever I thought I'd feel, it was just, I can't even describe it. The people who were there, praying. Once in a while, you'd see what like a mother reaching out to touch a name on the side of the wall. Oh, the war in Vietnam. And before that, the disruptions in the 1960s. You remember the 60s? That's the apocalypse. Esquire did a book called Smiling Through the Apocalypse. What events happened in the 1960s. And then before that, the war in Korea. Before that, the Second World War. Do you remember hearing about the atomic bomb for the first time? For some reason, we were crossing the street in front of the old post office. My mother described something about a terrible bomb that had been dropped. And that, I don't know why I remember that so much. But at any rate, there have been major disruptions all the way through our lives. Now, the history of Israel, think about the disruptions that they experienced. One of the major ones, of course, was Babylon, the Babylonian captivity. And it deeply affected Israeli society. They were driven from their homeland, from their lands, from their businesses, from their crops, from their religion. They couldn't go to the temple, and all of this was taken. The Babylonians took them out in waves. First of all, they got the military leaders, the government leaders, the people, the intellectual class. They took them all first. Then they went back for the others. But Isaiah, the theme of Isaiah is they could look forward to hope, and that the exile in Babylon was coming to an end thanks to Cyrus, who had captured or conquered Babylon. And so, of course, there was the good news that they could look forward to, the return to their homeland. And we can see the importance of the words, how beautiful upon the feet of the messenger who brings the news of Zion. And then that they could trust in God, that God lived and they could put in their trust. So there's the other theme in Isaiah, and that's the theme of peace and salvation. Now, our lesson guide says that the first part of Isaiah is judgment, doom, and gloom, up through chapter 39. But then from chapters 40 through 66, there's a restoration after a time of exile, and there's hope. So the second part of Isaiah is filled with passages of hope and restoration after the time of exile. The Lord has comforted the people. God has redeemed Jerusalem. That's in chapter 52:9. His people are to rejoice. The prophet also announces salvation. Your God reigns. And in verse 7, there is a sense of being rescued from trouble. When you think of salvation, that's what you think of, isn't it? A rescue from danger, from what threatens you. And when God reigns, there's a victory over danger or distress, a rule of peace and salvation. Now, Isaiah makes it clear that the reign of God is different from the reign of many rulers on earth. Think about the really bad rulers that have dominated society at one time or another. Of course, the obvious one is Adolf Hitler. Killings, over 6 million Jews in the concentration camps. Rose Post said it was more like 7 million, not closer to 6. And there was a terrible impact. When General Eisenhower was liberating Germany, and he was taken to one of the death camps, he just looked at it. It was just overtaken. He said, "My name is German, but I'm ashamed that my name is German after this." So what he did is he arranged for a fleet of buses to take all the town's inhabitants who were right by the death camp and crowded them into buses, and they had to march through the camp to see the piles of bodies and what had been going on behind the walls. The mayor and his wife of the town were so taken back that they, after the trip, went home and took their own lives. It was devastating. And I didn't see the pictures of myself to the camps until I think I saw the film Judgment at Nuremberg, I think in the early 60s. That's when they ran the pictures of the mounds of bodies. Just terrible. You can't watch it without feeling something. So there are other rulers. Think about Idi Amin, in Uganda at the time. And there's so many other bad rulers around, in one way or another. Ones that are cruel, ones that are vicious. There are also incredible numbers of them. Now, according to Isaiah, when God is in control, his people know his name. There's a relationship with God. And the earthly rulers, according to Isaiah, howl and try to destroy the relationship between people and God. They want to intercede between God and the people. And the Roman rulers are a particularly good example of that. After Caesar was assassinated, Julius Caesar, Augustus, there was a Halley's Comet that passed it over in the sky. And so Augustus passed it around that, well, that was proof that Caesar was a god, And many of the Roman emperors insisted that people worship them as gods. They were to put their trust in the Roman emperors. And then, of course, you got the depredations of Nero and what he did, the persecutions that went on under him and Trajan and some of the other Roman emperors. The earthly rulers are often dominated by political power, getting money, possessions. The focus is on that rather than having a right relationship with God. Now, the reign of God is focused on a peaceful, just, and loving relationship. You must have a peaceful, loving relationship with God. I'm going to conclude with a quotation from Isaiah 40, which is right, before our lesson today, but after, the chapter 39, which marks kind of a cutoff point between the doom and gloom. All nations before him are as nothing, and they are counted to him less than nothing, and vanity. Hast thou not known? Hast thou not heard that the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, fainteth not, neither is weary. There is no searching for his understanding. He giveth powers to the faint, and to them that have no might, he increaseth strength. But they who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. As Christ taught us, the kingdom of God is within us, and we become a member of God's kingdom through faith.
Right.
Good.